Crystal glasses shatter at the Gilded Spoon as Roman, the butcher, Varallo shoves Tarek Jenkins hard into the bar. "Fight back, boy." The 270-pound harbor boss challenges the small black waiter. Tarek is only here to pay medical bills for his paralyzed brother, trying to hold back to keep his job. But Roman's brutality pushes him into a corner. This conflict forces Tarek to reveal his biggest secret: 15 years of elite Krav Maga taught by a former IDF Special Forces agent. To survive, he must face Boston's most brutal gang, dark gun barrels, and a thick protection network. What will the 125-pound boy do to topple a crime empire in the blink of an eye? To understand how this night happened, we need to go back 6 months. Back then, Tarek Jenkins woke up every day at 5:15 in the morning. His alarm clock had a cracked screen. He lived in a small apartment in East Boston. The paint on the walls was peeling. The heater made a low, tired hum all night long. The apartment smelled like rubbing alcohol and old coffee. That smell came from his brother's room. Marcus Jenkins, 28 years old, had not walked in 5 years. A drunk driver hit his motorcycle on a rainy night. The crash broke his spine in 2 places. Every morning, Tarek walked into that room first. He checked on Marcus before he checked on anything else. He gently rubbed his brother's legs to keep the blood moving. The doctors said this helped. Marcus never complained about the pain. He just smiled at his little brother and said, "You're going to be late again." Tarek was small. He stood 5 feet 5 inches tall. He weighed only 125 pounds. His arms looked thin under his old jacket. Nobody who saw him on the street would guess his secret. After the morning routine, Tarek counted coins on the kitchen table. He lined them up in neat little stacks. Next to the coins sat a medical bill for $4,217.83. It was already 30 days late. He folded the bill and put it in his back pocket. Then he pulled on an old black vest. The vest was 2 sizes too big. He bought it at a thrift store for $6. It hung loose on his skinny frame and hid the hard muscle underneath. Tarek worked as a waiter at the Gilded Spoon. This restaurant sat in the middle of Back Bay, one of the richest parts of Boston. Cream silk tablecloths covered every table. Soft piano music played near the entrance. Rich lawyers and bankers came here to eat steak that cost more than Tarek made in a week. His manager, Franklin Pierce, never let him forget his place. Franklin had slick hair and a fake smile for customers. But behind the kitchen doors, his voice turned sharp and cold. "You're 3 minutes late, Jenkins," Franklin snapped one morning. "One more time and you're done." Tarek lowered his head. "It won't happen again, sir." He carried trays of expensive wine past tables full of important people. Some of them looked right through him, like he was invisible. Others gave him quick, cold stares, like he didn't belong in the room. Tarek gripped his serving tray a little tighter each time. He told himself the same thing every single day. Marcus needs this job. Just get through today. Nobody in that restaurant knew what Tarek carried inside him. Under his baggy vest was a body built like steel cable. His reflexes moved faster than most people could blink. He had trained for 15 years, since he was 10 years old, in a fighting style called Krav Maga. But he had promised himself he would never use it. Not here. Not unless he had no other choice. At night, after his shift ended, Tarek rode the bus home in silence. He watched the city lights pass by the window, one block after another. Sometimes he closed his eyes and pictured a different life. A life where Marcus could walk again. A life where nobody looked down on him. He kept a small notebook in his jacket pocket. Inside it, he tracked every dollar he earned and every dollar he owed. The numbers rarely matched the way he wanted them to. Still, he wrote them down every night, because Marcus had taught him that. "You can't fix what you don't track," Marcus used to say, back before the accident. On slow nights, Tarek thought about quitting. He thought about finding work somewhere quieter, somewhere kinder. But the pay at the Gilded Spoon was too good to walk away from. Rich customers left generous tips when they were happy. Those tips paid for Marcus's medicine. So Tarek kept his head down. He smiled at rude customers. He swallowed insults like bitter medicine, again and again, night after night. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself Marcus was worth it. That promise of restraint broke on a Tuesday night in March. Roman, the butcher, Varallo walked into the Gilded Spoon like he owned the building. In a way, he almost did. Roman ran the biggest crime network on the Boston waterfront. His hands controlled smuggling, extortion, and every dirty deal that moved through the harbor. Police officers looked away when his name came up. Nobody dared to write his name in a report. Roman stood 6 feet 4 inches tall. He weighed 270 pounds of solid muscle built in prison gyms. A long scar ran down his face, from his temple to his jaw. His ears were thick and lumpy, marked from years of street boxing. 5 men followed him everywhere, silent and dangerous, like shadows with fists. Roman believed he had earned every ounce of his power. He grew up poor near the docks, fighting for scraps just like everyone else in his old neighborhood. Somewhere along the way, he decided the world only respected fear. He built his whole life around that one cold idea. He never once questioned it, not even for a second. That night, Roman brought his crew to celebrate a shipment that had just cleared customs. He ordered the most expensive wine on the menu. Tarek carried the bottle to the table with steady hands. At a nearby table, an elderly woman named Mrs. Whitfield watched the scene unfold with growing unease. She came to the Gilded Spoon every Tuesday, always alone, always polite to the staff. She had noticed Tarek before, how quiet and careful he always seemed. Something about tonight felt different, heavier, like a storm building just before it breaks. As Tarek poured the wine, Roman knocked the glass off the table on purpose. It shattered on the marble floor, splashing red wine across the tile. "Clean that up," Roman said, his voice low and mean. "On your knees, boy." The whole restaurant went quiet. 50 guests stopped eating and stared. Tarek felt his face grow hot, but he stayed calm. He knelt down and wiped up the mess with a cloth napkin. His hands did not shake. His heart pounded, but his face stayed still. Roman was not finished. He grabbed Tarek's collar with one huge hand and yanked him up off the floor. He shoved him backward into the bar. Bottles and crystal glasses crashed and shattered around them. "Fight back, boy," Roman shouted, his breath heavy with whiskey. He pressed Tarek's neck hard against the wooden bar edge. "Cry? Beg. That's all your kind is good for." The room held its breath. Franklin Pierce stood frozen near the kitchen door, too scared to move. Nobody stepped forward to help. 50 pairs of eyes watched Tarek get choked against the bar in front of them. Something inside Tarek finally snapped. 15 years of holding back came loose in one single second. His hand shot up and locked onto Roman's wrist. He twisted it fast, hard, and clean. A sharp crack echoed through the silent room. Roman's eyes went wide with shock. Before he could even scream, Tarek's other hand struck his throat. Roman gasped and dropped like a sack of bricks. The 5 men behind him lunged forward, but Tarek moved like water. He ducked under a swinging fist and drove his elbow into a man's ribs. He grabbed a second man's arm and threw him into a table. Glasses exploded across the floor. He kicked out the knee of a third attacker, who screamed and crumpled to the ground. The whole fight lasted 6 seconds. Just 6 seconds, and 5 grown men lay groaning on the marble floor. Roman Varallo, the terror of Boston Harbor, knelt with blood dripping from his split lip. Tears mixed with the blood on his face. Tarek stood there, breathing hard, his baggy vest torn at the shoulder. 50 guests stared at him in total silence. Nobody clapped. Nobody moved. They simply could not believe what they had just seen. Mrs. Whitfield slowly rose from her seat, her hands pressed against her chest in shock. She had watched this same young man carry her wine glass with such gentle care, week after week. Now she watched him stand, over 5 grown men, calm as still water. She would later tell a local reporter that she had never seen anything so quietly powerful in her life. A young couple near the window whispered to each other, phones already raised to record the aftermath. Somewhere in the back of the dining room, a busboy dropped an entire tray of dishes, the crash swallowed by the heavier silence around him. Nobody moved to help clean it up. Franklin Pierce found his voice first, and it came out shaking. "You're fired," he stammered, pointing a trembling finger. Get out now, before he wakes up and kills us all." That was the thanks Tarek got for surviving. Detective Sarah Callahan arrived, within minutes, pushing through the crowd near the entrance. She had a sharp gaze and short dark hair pulled back tight. She had worked Boston's organized crime unit for 9 years. She pulled Tarek into a quiet corner near the coat check. You just made the most dangerous man in this city bleed in front of 50 witnesses, she whispered. Roman will not let this go. He will come for you. He will come for anyone you love. Tarek's stomach turned cold. He thought of Marcus alone in that apartment. I can protect you, Sarah said. Work with me. Help me build a case against Roman. In return, I keep you and your brother safe. Tarek shook his head fast. I don't trust cops. Half your department takes his money. Not me, Sarah said firmly. Never me. But fear had already taken hold of Tarek's mind. He pulled away from her and ran out into the cold March night. He sprinted the 12 blocks home without stopping once. His lungs burned in the freezing air. When he reached the apartment, he threw open a torn suitcase on his bed and started stuffing in clothes. We're leaving tonight, he told Marcus, his hands moving fast. There's a bus at 11:30. We'll go to Philadelphia. Start over somewhere new. Marcus reached out and grabbed his brother's wrist, stopping him cold. Running never heals a wound, Tarek, Marcus said quietly. You've been running your whole life. Tarek froze. Those words cut deep, straight to an old wound. When Tarek was 7 years old, 2 masked men broke into their childhood home. Their parents fought back. Tarek hid in a closet, too small and too scared to help. He heard everything through the thin closet door. He had carried that guilt for 18 years. He swore he would never freeze like that again. That promise was the real reason he trained so hard with Gideon Miller. Marcus saw the pain flash across his brother's face. I'm not asking you to fight, Marcus said gently. I'm asking you to stop hiding from who you are. The suitcase sat half-packed on the bed. The clock read 10:47 at night. Tarek stared at it, torn between fear and something stronger pulling at his chest. He zipped the suitcase shut anyway. But instead of heading for the bus station, he walked out into the rain. He turned toward a different address, one he hadn't visited in 3 years. Gideon Miller lived in a basement apartment in Dorchester. Gideon was 71 years old, a former Special Forces soldier who once served in the Israeli Defense Forces. He had taught young Tarek how to fight, starting when the boy was only 10 years old. Old boxing bags hung around the small room, some of them torn and patched with tape. The air smelled like sweat and menthol muscle rub. Gideon sat in a worn wheelchair near the window, an old injury from his army days now catching up with his knees. Gideon had first met Tarek at a community center 15 years earlier. The boy had been quiet then, too, but his eyes carried a fear Gideon recognized instantly. He had seen that same fear in young soldiers overseas, the look of someone who froze once and never forgave themselves for it. Gideon offered him a spot in his evening class for free. He never once asked why the boy needed it so badly. Over the years, Tarek trained harder than any student Gideon had ever taught. He showed up in rain, in snow, even on days when his knuckles were already bruised from work. Gideon watched him grow from a scared child into a disciplined young man. He never once saw Tarek throw a punch outside that basement gym. Not until tonight. Tarek dropped to his knees in front of his old teacher. I broke my promise, he said, his voice cracking. I used what you taught me. I hurt people tonight. Gideon did not scold him. Instead, he placed a rough, calloused hand on Tarek's shoulder. Krav Maga was never about killing, Gideon said slowly. It's about finding a way out when there is no way out left. He paused, studying his student's face. Tonight, the only way out was through the wolf's teeth. Gideon reached into a drawer and pulled out an old brass compass, worn smooth from years of handling. He also handed Tarek a folded slip of paper with an address written on it. Pier 14, Gideon said. That's where Roman keeps his real records. Bank accounts, bribes, shipping routes. If you want this fight to end, that paper is your weapon now. Tarek stared down at the compass in his open palm. His mind raced. How could someone his size sneak into the most guarded place on the entire waterfront? That night, cold rain fell steady over the Boston harbor. Tarek peeled off his torn waiter's uniform and pulled on a plain black jacket instead. He walked toward Pier 14, a restricted zone crawling with Roman's armed guards. He crept low behind rusted shipping containers, his breath sinking with the slow rhythm of the waves. He was no longer the shy waiter from the fancy restaurant. Every muscle in his body felt tight, alert, and ready. Years of training clicked into place, sharp and automatic. He had chosen to hunt his enemy first, before his enemy found his brother. Near the front gate, two large guards stood watch, laughing at something on a phone screen. Tarek did not reach for a weapon. Instead, he grabbed a stray pen from his pocket and used pure leverage instead. He locked one guard's throat and struck a pressure point with the pen's blunt end. Both men dropped unconscious within 10 silent seconds. From the shadows, Detective Sarah Callahan stepped out to meet him. "I followed you," she whispered. "I can loop the security cameras for 6 minutes. That's all the time you'll get." She handed him a small radio earpiece. Deeper inside the docks, a dangerous man named Marco the Needle watched the security feed flicker and glitch. Marco was Roman's most feared enforcer. He earned his nickname from a habit of torturing people with rusted needles. He squinted hard at a blurry image on the screen. "That skinny waiter," Marco muttered to himself, tapping the frozen frame. "He's got a brother, a cripple, living in East Boston." A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "Let's go pay him a visit." While Tarek searched deeper into the docks, his phone buzzed in his pocket. The screen showed Marcus's number calling. He answered, and a low, raspy laugh crackled through the speaker. It was Roman's voice, thick with menace. "Kid," Roman growled, "I'm sitting in your living room right now. Your brother makes decent tea for a cripple." I shot through Tarek's veins. He sprinted back toward East Boston, his lungs burning, his mind blank with panic. He kicked open the apartment door and found it destroyed. Marcus's wheelchair lay snapped in half on the floor. Fresh blood stained the carpet in a dark smear. A torn medical bill lay crumpled near the overturned table. A note was pinned to the wall with a knife. It read, "Wharf 14. Come alone, or your brother stops breathing by sunrise." Sarah's voice buzzed urgently in his earpiece. "Wait for backup, Tarek." "SWAT can be there in 20 minutes. "Marcus doesn't have 20 minutes, Tarek said, and he was already running toward the water. Wharf 14 held an old, abandoned meat freezer warehouse near the edge of the harbor. Tarek stepped inside, and his breath instantly turned to white fog in the freezing air. Metal hooks lined the ceiling, swaying slightly in a draft. Roman stood in the center of the room, arms crossed, a grin stretched across his scarred face. Behind him, Marcus hung limp from a meat hook, his face swollen and bruised. "You came," Roman said, almost sounding pleased. "Good. I was starting to think your kind only knew how to run." 3 of Roman's men rushed forward at once, knives glinting under the dim overhead lights. The floor beneath their boots was slick, with a thin layer of ice. Tarek moved fast, using the icy floor to his advantage instead of fighting against it. He grabbed a hanging meat hook to block a slashing blade, then used his own momentum to slide across the ice. He twisted hard and snapped the first attacker's wrist with a sickening crunch. A blade sliced deep into Tarek's right shoulder during the struggle. Blood spread fast, soaking through his black jacket in a warm, dark stain. Pain screamed through his entire arm, but his focus never wavered. He forced himself to keep moving. The cold bit into the open wound like fire. His vision blurred at the edges for a moment. Then he looked up and saw Marcus fading, his head hanging low against his chest. A surge of pure adrenaline pushed through the pain. Tarek spun and drove a hard kick into the knee of the third attacker. The man screamed and dropped to the frozen floor, unable to stand. All 3 men lay groaning on the ice within seconds. Roman stood alone now, his cocky grin finally starting to crack at the edges. With shaking hands, Tarek cut the ropes binding his brother. Marcus slumped forward into his arms. The 2 brothers held each other tightly in the freezing dark, both breathing hard, both alive. While searching for another exit, Tarek noticed a small office in the corner of the warehouse. Its door hung slightly open, and a heavy black safe sat inside, unlocked and gleaming. Curious, he stepped inside and pulled the safe door wide. Inside sat a thick leather notebook, its pages filled with names, numbers, and dates. It listed every bribe Roman had ever paid to Boston officials. It also mapped out every smuggling route his crew used along the East Coast. This notebook was worth more than money. It was the one thing that could finally bury Roman's empire for good. Tarek shoved it deep into the inside pocket of his jacket, right against his racing heart. Just then, a piercing alarm blared through the entire warehouse complex. Red emergency lights flashed against the concrete walls. Someone had found the missing notebook, and now every exit was sealed shut. Roman had discovered the empty safe, and his face twisted into pure rage. He screamed orders through his radio, sealing every gate on Pier 14. Every available man was ordered to hunt down the two brothers before they could escape. Tarek lifted Marcus onto his back, careful of his brother's fragile spine. Blood from his shoulder wound soaked through both of their jackets as he moved. He weaved through a maze of shipping containers under heavy, pouring rain. Dogs barked somewhere behind them in the darkness. Bright flashlight beams swept back and forth across the wet concrete, hunting for any sign of movement. "Leave me," Marcus whispered weakly against his brother's ear. "You've already done enough, Tarek. Just run." Tarek gripped his brother's legs tighter and kept moving forward. "We go together," he said through gritted teeth. "Or we don't go at all." They finally broke free near the edge of the river, gasping for breath in the cold night air. Just as hope flickered, bright headlights cut through the darkness ahead of them. Roman's black pickup truck screeched to a stop, blocking their only path forward. Roman stepped out slowly, a pistol gripped tight in one massive hand. Rain poured down his scarred face as he raised the weapon and pointed it directly at Marcus's head. "If I can't have my empire," Roman said coldly, "then neither of you gets to walk away." A single gunshot cracked through the night from somewhere far off in the darkness. The bullet struck Roman's wrist with perfect accuracy, and his pistol clattered into the river below. Detective Sarah Callahan lowered her rifle from a rooftop nearby, her aim steady even in the storm. Roman roared in fury and pain, charging forward like a wounded animal. His full 270 pounds crashed toward Tarek with terrifying speed. Tarek, exhausted and bleeding, still held his ground with quiet, steady focus. He ducked beneath a wild, powerful swing and slipped in close to Roman's side. Using pure leverage instead of raw strength, he twisted Roman's already broken wrist even further. A loud, sharp crack echoed off the nearby warehouses. Tarek struck 3 fast blows with the heel of his palm, aimed straight at Roman's throat and jaw. Roman's massive body crumpled onto the wet concrete, finally beaten. Tears mixed with rain streamed down the fallen crime boss's face. "Please," Roman choked out, staring up at the small man standing above him. "Please, don't hurt me anymore." The man he once called boy and worthless now stood completely calm above him. 15 years of quiet discipline had led to this single, silent moment of justice. Sunlight slowly broke over Boston the next morning, warm and golden, after the long, violent night. Sarah Callahan took the leather notebook straight to her captain within hours. The evidence sparked the largest organized crime raid in Boston police history. Officers arrested Roman Varallo and every corrupt official listed inside those stained pages. A judge later sentenced Roman to 15 years in federal prison, without any chance of early release. The harbor crime network that had terrorized the docks for decades finally collapsed completely. News vans lined the street outside the courthouse on the day of Roman's sentencing. Reporters shouted questions as officers led him away in handcuffs. His scarred face showed no more anger, only exhaustion. Some of his old victims stood outside the courthouse that morning, watching in silence. A few of them cried, not from sadness, but from a strange sense of relief they had waited years to feel. Detectives later discovered Roman had controlled parts of the waterfront for almost 2 decades. Small business owners, who once paid him protection money, finally felt safe enough to speak up. One by one, they came forward with their own stories. Each new testimony added another crack to the empire Roman had built on fear. Tarek received a legal settlement of $150,000 from the restaurant's insurance fund, along with a share of Roman's seized assets. The very first thing he did was pay off every single one of his brother's medical bills. 6 months later, spring sunlight poured through wide windows into a busy gym in East Boston. A hand-painted sign above the door read, Miller and Jenkins Self-Defense Academy, named after both his teacher and himself. Local kids from the neighborhood trained there completely free of charge. Gideon Miller sat proudly near the front desk, watching his old student teach a new generation. His wheelchair now had a fresh coat of paint, a small gift from Tarek. Marcus had undergone spinal surgery, fully paid for by the settlement money and expert doctors. In the corner of the gym, he slowly set aside his crutches for the very first time. His legs shook, but they held steady beneath him. One careful step, then a second, then a third, wobbling but true. Tarek turned around just in time to see his brother walking toward him, unaided, for the first time in 5 years. He dropped everything and ran across the gym floor to meet him halfway. The two brothers collapsed into each other's arms, laughing and crying at the same time. Around them, kids stopped their training to watch, some of them wiping away quiet tears of their own. Outside, Boston moved on, with its busy morning, unaware of the quiet miracle happening inside that small gym. But for Tarek Jenkins, the fight had never really been about proving anything to anyone else. It had always been about standing tall enough, finally, to catch his brother when he fell. Word had spread fast through East Boston about the waiter who took down a crime boss. Neighbors who once looked past Tarek on the street now stopped to shake his hand. Children pointed at him with wide, admiring eyes. He never once bragged about that night at the Gilded Spoon. Mrs. Whitfield, the elderly woman from the restaurant, visited the new gym one quiet afternoon in June. She brought a small bouquet of flowers and a card for Tarek. "You gave everyone in that room something to believe in," she told him, her eyes warm. "I just wanted to say thank you." Tarek thanked her and placed the flowers near the front desk, where they stayed for weeks. Local shop owners along the block started offering Tarek free coffee whenever he walked by in the morning. He always insisted on paying, and they always refused his money. It became a small, friendly argument the whole neighborhood grew fond of watching. The local paper ran a short story about the gym a few weeks after it opened. The headline read simply, "The Quiet Waiter Who Changed the Waterfront." Tarek kept a folded copy of that article in his desk drawer, tucked beside the old medical bill. He rarely showed it to anyone, but he liked knowing it was there. When reporters showed up asking for interviews, Tarek always gave the same simple answer. "I just wanted my brother to be safe," he told them. Everything else just happened along the way. Franklin Pierce lost his job at the restaurant within weeks of the scandal breaking. Owners of the Gilded Spoon did not want their name tied to a crime boss and a violent cover-up. Franklin later sent Tarek a short, awkward letter of apology, which Tarek quietly kept in a drawer. Detective Sarah Callahan received a promotion for cracking the largest case of her career. She still stopped by the gym sometimes, usually on quiet Sunday mornings. She liked watching Gideon teach the little kids simple, safe moves, nothing like the deadly skills he once taught Tarek. Gideon often told his new students the same lesson he gave Tarek years earlier. "Strength is not about hurting people," he would say, resting his weathered hands on his cane. "Strength is about protecting the people who cannot protect themselves." Tarek kept one thing from that terrible night pinned above his desk at the gym. It was the torn medical bill for $4,217.83, now marked paid in full. He looked at it every single morning before opening the doors. It reminded him where he came from. It reminded him why he never wanted to run again. Late one evening, after all the students had gone home, Marcus rolled his old wheelchair into a quiet corner of the gym. He kept it there on purpose, not out of pain, but out of gratitude for how far he had come. Tarek sat beside him on a folded gym mat, both brothers watching the sunset through tall windows. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. They didn't need to. "You know," Marcus finally said, breaking the silence, with a small smile, "I always knew you had something special in you." He nudged his brother's shoulder gently. "I just didn't know it would save both our lives." Tarek laughed softly, the sound easy and light for the first time in years. "Neither did I," he admitted. "I just knew I couldn't lose you." Outside, the harbor lights blinked on one by one as darkness settled over the city. Boston kept moving, the way big cities always do, full of strangers, with their own quiet struggles. But somewhere in East Boston, two brothers sat together in peace, finally safe, finally free. The gym stayed open late that night, its lights glowing warm against the dark street outside. A few neighborhood kids lingered by the door, peeking in at the brothers with quiet curiosity. Tarek waved them inside without a second thought. He taught them how to plant their feet the right way. He showed them how to stand tall, shoulders back, chin steady. Not to hurt anyone, he told them, but to know their own strength lived somewhere inside them, waiting. One small girl asked him a simple question before she left for home that night. "Were you scared?" she asked, looking up at him with wide eyes. Fighting that big man. Tarek knelt down to her level and thought about the question carefully before answering. "I was terrified," he admitted honestly. "But sometimes you have to be brave even when you're scared." She nodded slowly, like she understood something important for the first time. Then she ran off to catch up with her friends outside, disappearing into the cool evening air. Gideon watched the whole exchange from his spot near the window, a quiet pride settling over his tired face. He had trained hundreds of students over the decades, but none had ever made him prouder than this one. He thought back to a scared 10-year-old boy who once showed up at his door years ago. That boy had lost his parents to violence and carried guilt too heavy for such small shoulders. Somehow, against every hard odd, that boy had grown into a man who protected instead of hid. Marcus, still getting used to his new strength, took a few more careful steps across the gym floor. Each step came a little easier than the last one before it. Tarek stood close by, ready to catch him if he stumbled, but he never had to. By the time the last student left and the lights dimmed low, the gym stood quiet and still. Only the soft hum of the old heater filled the empty space, a small, comfortable sound after such a loud, violent chapter. Tarek locked the front door and looked back once at the room full of worn mats and taped-up punching bags. This place held more than just training equipment now. It held second chances for himself, for his brother, and for a whole neighborhood full of kids who needed to believe in something better. He stepped out into the cool Boston night, the harbor breeze carrying the familiar smell of salt water and distant fishing boats. Somewhere out past the docks, the same waters that once hid Roman's crimes now sat calm and quiet under a wide, star-filled sky. Tarek Jenkins walked home slowly that night, no longer hiding inside a jacket 2 sizes too big. He walked tall, steady, and unafraid, the way he always could have, if the world had only looked closer sooner. But some strength, he had learned, was never meant to be seen right away. Sometimes it waited quietly, patiently, until the exact right moment finally arrived to prove itself. And when that moment came, nothing in Boston, not even a crime empire, could stand in its way.